Hi, Little Justice leaders. I am so excited to be back with another guest. Today, we're going to be talking about teaching about social justice with elementary school students. And we're going to be hearing from an expert on this topic. So I'm really, really excited for this conversation. I'm Shelby. I'm the creator of Little Justice Leaders. In case you don't know, at Little Justice Leaders, we help educators and schools build cultures of social justice. So if you're interested in that, you are in the right place. And today we are talking to someone who, like I said, is an expert on this topic. Tamara Slade is a third grade teacher who is doing the work of social justice in her classroom every single day. And she's also the author of the book Anti-Racist Art Activities for Kids. So she is not only doing the work every day, but is also putting it out there for others and supporting other teachers to be doing social justice and anti-racist work. So we are so excited for this conversation. Welcome, Tamara. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to talk about social justice in the classroom. It's for
Yes.
kids.
Yes, exactly. Me too. So do you want to start by just introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your teaching experience, and how you got into teaching.
I got into teaching. I was a TA, that was my work study job in undergrad. And it became one of those things where I slowly started to realize I was liking my job more than like some of my classes. And so I decided to take a gap year and be a TA/sub full time. And then I ended up going to the UCLA teacher education program and loving it. And that's really what got me into teaching social justice. The program and my advisor, Melissa Arias, just did a really great job of helping me dive in and also getting a lot of education from other professors like Dr. Orange. It's just been lovely.
That's awesome. And we have that in common. I also went to the UCLA Grad School of Education. You got into teaching for social justice through that program, through your advisors and mentors. Why is it so important to you now to educate young people for social justice?
For me, like it fills that need of purpose. I really want the world to be better than it is. And I feel like it's cliche, but it's true that children really are our future. And I am really excited by what like I see in these future generations and like what they're capable of and the way the world can become.
Yeah, I agree. I love that so much. And I wish every teacher, and I know so many teachers out there do feel that way. I wish every teacher felt that way and that excited and hopeful for the young people. At Little Justice Leaders, we talk a lot about social justice and education. You and I have had lots of conversations about social justice and education. But I think for a lot of folks, it can be hard to picture what that actually means in a tangible way, which is why I love your book so much because it gives so many concrete examples of how to do this work. But can you give some examples from your own life, from your own experience as a teacher of what social justice education actually looks like in a classroom?
You just dove right into my special interests. Well, I have a lot to say about this. Let me tell you about
I
this.
love it. That's what we're here for. We're here to learn from you.
Thanks. Yeah, this school year has been really challenging. I came in with a really just challenging group. The behaviors just being like off the wall, like my first few weeks of just being like, this is something I've never experienced in my whole career, like every other day. And just having a class that was not at the same academic level that I've had historically, which was surprising to me because this group, I think, was the first group of third graders that like had kindergarten, had started kindergarten, like when we came back into the classroom, like post 2020 stuff. And so I came in like, oh my gosh, I need to just do SEL. I just needs to be social emotional. And coincidentally, I had been really interested in Elena Aguilar and her work. And so I had already been kind of toying with this idea of how do I make SEL even more social justice? And there's this quote that I want to read that's from her book. It's on page 176 of Coaching for Equity. She says, accepting and embracing emotions is an act of resistance. To do so is to reject systems of oppression that intentionally, by design, seek to dehumanize and subjugate us. They seek to sever the relationships we have with our bodies, minds, and hearts. And that just really like stuck with me and made me realize that by teaching my kids all of these social emotional skills and to sit in their feelings, and what does it even mean when someone says feel your feelings? I think I had like heard it and said it and regurgitated it, but I think more in the last few years, I've really been able to understand what it means on a deeper level. And I realized that that really is fighting like white systems of white supremacy, you know? And so I've been teaching that to my kids. So I like created all of these slides and we've been talking about the difference between a feeling and an emotion, you know, and how a feeling is more like what we make sense of it, whereas emotion is a physical reaction in our body and all of that stuff. And then we talked about like the myths about feelings that we have. So like this idea of like what feelings boys are allowed to have and what feelings girls are allowed to have and why that is and the history behind it, what feelings white kids are allowed to have and black kids are allowed to have according to society and how those are myths and these are stereotypes that aren't true and kind of where they come from and unpacking that. And this slide deck was maybe like 30 or 40 slides, but it took us forever to get through also just because it was hard to even get them to sit on the rug and listen to it. And I came in with this class that was very like anti anti feelings, but we're feeling it like these feelings in ways that were not productive or helpful or, quick to be angry, but then not really able to unpack that. And so they also came with this very like punitive mindset instead of this restorative lens. And so that's something we had to like really work on. They went from like this very like, no, I want this other kid to have their parents called to go to the principal's office. And instead I'm like, well, what about the peace pact? Like, what if we just fix it? What if they just fix the problem? And at first I was like, this feels impossible. I would like sit and I get emotional and I just like, how am I going to shift them in the direction? And just in the past like several months, like so much change has happened and it's been hard but lovely to see. And it's just so nice. And I think a lot of people think of it as like maybe like, oh, but like how do you squeeze that in? Or like what's this add-on? And I'm like, well, with the social emotional stuff, I would do like 10 minutes a day. And then some of the paragraphs that like were on the slide decks, I'd like take it, print it, and then we'd be using it for informational. So I'd be like, okay, identify in small group, I'd be like, okay, identify the main idea and then the supporting details in this paragraph. And the paragraph would be like, why like it's important to resist like these myths about who's allowed to feel what feelings,
Yeah, that's amazing. So you're able to kind of like weave it into the academic learning that you're trying to get, but also just, fitting it in with 10 minutes a day of like focus. And you're already
Yeah.
seeing like an impact from that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like really refreshing to see their mind shifts kind of
Yeah.
change. Because it also like my class came in with this mindset of just, you hurt me, I hurt you back. And so a lot of like problematic language being used, a lot of oppressive language.
Yeah.
Like it going back to like everyday feeling like something I never experienced in my career. Like I have a class that is almost entirely Black students, and we were dealing with, as a whole grade level, having kids use like racial slurs with each other. Like, and that was just something I'd never really experienced because my school just isn't like that typically as a culture. And so hearing like terrible things like Black African monkey, N-word hard R. Yeah. Hearing gay used as a slur, girl used as a slur, just really terrible things. And having to explain, okay, let's unpack them. Let's like talk about like identities and why identities are not put downs. And really diving into, okay, let's try not to combat racism with sexism or with our sexism or, And so it's like, oh, well, you called me this, so I'm going to call you that back, right? Zesty is like the new thing that I'm like, okay, well, it's not. The kids love to use that nowadays. And it's been really nice to see them go from, okay, you called me a girl, like, one boy telling another boy, like, oh, well, you look like a girl or you're acting like a girl or whatever. And now shifting it from like, oh, yeah, well, you're zesty as a comeback instead of being, that's sexist. Like teaching them the language of like, okay, like I don't like that comment. That sounds racist, you know? And that like calling each other out on the behavior that they don't like instead of just, just because you're mad at someone or someone hurt your feelings, you don't just get to like pull your racism out of your back and
Right.
throw it, because then the
Right.
whole space feels unsafe. Anyone who
Mhm.
listens and is like, oh, okay, this isn't a safe space for all identities.
Right.
And so seeing that shift and them actually understanding the impact has been really nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it speaks to the world that we are in now.
It really does, and it's unfortunately a sad trend that we've been seeing at Little Justice Leaders at the schools we work with across the country of just, more racial slurs, using "that's gay" as a slur, like a lot of just hateful language coming into classroom spaces. It sounds like you've done, a great job of managing and reshaping the culture and teaching them how to, name things, call each other out, respond to those call outs, all the things. For teachers who maybe don't feel as confident, do you have any advice for, like, when this hateful language comes up in the classroom, which sadly is happening everywhere? Any advice for how to handle it in the moment?
I think for me, a lot of the time is like I think acknowledging the fact that someone just said something that was wild, you know? I think going, whoa, what makes you say that? What do you think that means? Asking those questions is a great way to start. 'Cause sometimes they just don't know, you know? Like then they don't know the history. They don't know why
Mhm.
it's wrong. Often with using gay as a slur, they just think it means bad.
Yeah.
They don't understand like what it means on a deeper
Mhm.
level. Sometimes they do though. And that always surprises me. It's like, oh, and you're using it, so you know how you're using it. But okay.
Yeah.
So I think just asking questions and seeing
Mhm.
where they're at, where they're coming from. And then my first go-to is read aloud. Straight into a read aloud. Like, okay, because someone has written it in a book in a way that I could probably I don't know if I could explain it always better than the story. Or
Yeah.
some they don't wanna listen to me as much. I'm not as cool as something that's like I don't know, something about books is just, like, immediately respected more than just,
Mhm.
"That's just what Miss Slade says," you
Right.
know? But if it's like if I'm over time exposing them to all these books, they're like, "Wow, there's a lot of people who think this. It's this one person who's telling me, you know,
Yeah.
to be inclusive and open-minded," and I don't know. I've noticed that when given the choice, if kids have the choice to believe and feel something hateful
Yeah.
or believe and feel that like life should be filled with like love and inclusivity and everyone being safe, they always choose the love and the safety
Yeah.
over these strict boxes and lines and they want to be free.
Yeah.
So they just need the exposure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that, so much of human nature, and we see this in our young people, is genuine kindness, genuine, not wanting to hurt other people, sometimes not realizing when they are. So you teach third grade. So yeah, I imagine often they don't 100% know what they're saying. And even if they do, they probably don't fully understand the impact. So I think, naming those things, calling it out, teaching them, educating them, asking questions. I love the idea of starting with asking questions, because sometimes we are placing our own assumptions on why they're saying something, where they learned it from, what they think it means. So starting with questions and then going to read alouds. There are so many good books on every topic you can imagine. We have tons of recommendations on that. So, and I'm sure you have many as well. So yeah, I think those are really, really good suggestions, especially if you're kind of just getting started and not sure where to start. Read alouds are such a good place. But I do want to acknowledge kind of what is on a lot of folks' minds right now when it comes to social justice in the classroom. There are, a lot of people, teachers who have been doing this work or want to do this work, but they're being restricted because of new directives from the Trump administration, new laws, new regulations, districts pulling back out of fear of loss of funding or other kind of pushback. So how do you imagine that we can kind of collectively move forward as educators who care about social justice but are being silenced by laws and regulations?
I mean, that's such a good question. Even just thinking about what's happening in the news with Harvard, like really saying, we you don't get to tell us what we teach. I think really leaning into our unions is like the way to go. Like I'm lucky to be part of UTLA and having such a strong union. And I know other people aren't as lucky to have such big and strong unions, but I think power in numbers is the only way we can fight this. And it's different this time around of like this presidency. I mean, even like doing this interview, I had a thought in my mind like, how safe is it for me to do this? Like even just speaking publicly like this on another platform, I think it we have to be brave and we have to do what we know is right and find a way to keep our jobs in the meantime because it'll do the work.
Yeah, and it is scary. I want to acknowledge that. I want to thank you for coming and having this conversation publicly because there's a lot of good reasons to not have these conversations right now because it is scary. There is a lot of pushback coming from every imaginable side, whether it's administrators or other teachers, parents and caregivers, or the actual law and politicians. There's so many moving pieces as educators, and I have the privilege of working with educators every day who are just like you said, being brave and doing it anyway, right? Because they know it's right. And you're doing it anyway because you know it's right. And spreading the word about it so that other teachers kind of can gain that confidence. Obviously want to recognize that some people, some educators have more privilege than others, some have more support, some have more ability to kind of push boundaries and others don't. So our advice is always do what you can, even if what you can do feels really small. When we're all kind of taking action collectively together, maybe pushing ourselves and challenging ourselves to be a little more brave is such a hopefully good way that we can all kind of move forward together. So thank you so much, Tamara, for being here, for having this conversation. I know it's not easy. How can our community find you, support your work, and cheer you on in all the work that you're doing?
So our book, Anti-Racist Art Activities for Kids, is a great start. Like I use that actually all the time. That's how I was teaching my kids about punitive versus restorative and transformative justice, because I wrote that section of the book. And then the Teach for Tomorrow Instagram, but also the Anti-Racist Art Teacher Instagram has a lot of stuff in the website as well.
So I'll link all those things below. Highly recommend the book. Like go get the book right now. It gives you so many good ideas on where to start or how to deepen this work if you're already doing it. So yes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this conversation. For those of you watching, if you care about social justice and education, please like subscribe to our channel. Come learn more about Little Justice Leaders. We work with schools, we work with educators, and we work with families who want to bring justice into this work, especially now, and who are passionate about it. So reach out if you're interested. I'll link some ways below that you can get involved and find out how we could work together. But otherwise, be sure to subscribe so you can follow along with this series. We're going to be talking to a number of teachers who are doing the work and giving advice and feedback and ideas and just collectively storytelling about this moment in time that we're in and this really important work that folks are doing. So once again, Tamara, thank you so much. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to come and talk with me today.